Good afternoon to all the students present for this course on International Human Resource Management. So, my dear students, let us begin our journey by understanding the importance of this particular course. We will see what are the different sort of aspects that we need to take into consideration throughout this course, throughout this journey, which will help us, which will enable us to acquaint ourselves to the international practices of human resources. Besides that, today we'll have a brief of this particular course, the overview of this particular course, and then in the succeeding sessions, we'll explore the different aspects of international human resource management practices. But before we move to the journey, let us understand why do we think of this particular topic? What is the significance of this topic, international human resource management practices? So friends, we have understood that nowadays, because of this liberalization or globalization policies, the entire globe is treated as a single marketplace where we are not only competing with the local players, but also we are competing with the global giants, global legends in the field of business itself. Competition has become threshold. So unless and until we do have that competitive advantage, we cannot survive. And when these organizations have no other options than to go for globalization process, than to have their operations in the global territory, so there it becomes very difficult for the organizations to survive unless and until they do come out with different sort of strategic aspects. And one of such kind of strategic aspect is to deal with human resources. Because dealing with human resources at the national level and dealing with human resources at the international level brings a lot of changes in the practices. So it's not about dealing with the administrative, day-to-day administrative practices as we carry out in the local level or at the national level. But when we move beyond the territory, we have to look so many things into account. And that is what that makes this process more complex one. So we need to understand that unless and until the human resources are managed properly at the international arena, at the global level, with different sort of territories in different countries, where people belonging to different cultural backgrounds, fooding habits, the dressing habits, clothing habits, all of those differences, all of those diversities, unless and until tackled properly, it is very difficult for the organizations to survive. And success of the organization depends on how best we do manage these resources at the international level only. That is why we need to understand the basic aspects of managing people at international level, managing people in different international territories, different countries, beyond the domestic level of territory. So this particular course is designed to enable us to have depth of the understanding to deal with all those issues related to human resources in international level or at global level itself. This course focuses on exploring the differences of the domestic level of practices and international level of practices and the necessary modifications that we need to bring into it for the same. So let us begin our journey with having a brief understanding of the course content itself. The entire course is divided into 4 blocks, where the block 1 deals with the overview of international human resource management practices. Block 2 deals with particular aspects of human resource management practices, so as to say the vertical functions of human resource management practices. The block 3 deals with the different sort of leadership or the importance of leadership for international HR practices. And block 4 deals with different industrial relations, IR issues, challenges, and all those things. So if I'll say that this block 1 is further divided into 4 units, where you can say that the unit 1 that we are going to cover up today deals with the basic introduction, the overview of the international human resource management practices, what we need to know, the basic aspects of IHRM. Unit 2 deals with the different sort of societal and cultural context of IHRM. This is one of the most important aspects of international human resource management practices. Different sort of societal and cultural contexts. That is what we need to understand. Unit 3 deals with all those diversities that arises because of this cross-cultural issues. And unless and until these diversities are managed properly, it will be very difficult for the organizations to achieve the success. And unit 4 is strategic HRM practices, strategic human resource practices in the international context. So module 1 or this block 1 will give us a brief of the international HR practices. Right? But when we move to block 2, that deals with particular HR practices. Like you can see that unit 5 deals with the staffing procedures for international assignments, staffing procedures for organizations moving out from domestic level of territory to international territory. Unit 6 deals with the training and developmental issues. Major things that we need to take into consideration is the people who move from domestic level of organizations to their international organizations, right? International borders. They are completely aware of the situation. So it becomes an essential aspect of the HR manager to prepare, to groom the employees who have been assigned with these international assignments, right? To make them adaptable, cope with the requirements of the organization. That is so pre-departure training, ongoing training, like all of those things are to be taken into consideration for that. Similarly, how do we evaluate performances of the individuals at international level? That is dealt in unit 7, and we do talk of unit 8 as it has compensation administration as one of the most important dimensions of dealing with people. So there may be many such different sort of problems which may arise out of that. Okay? Beyond that, block 3 always we say that it's okay that we assign people different sort of roles, but assigning different sort of roles will not ensure that people do perform their part of responsibilities. What is essential is to ensure that to have a proper guidance to the people itself, so that they can perform their part of roles and responsibilities. And who does that? The leader. So the leader's role becomes highly significant while preparing the assignees for any kind of assignments, international assignments. So developing that mindset within the people is important. Motivating them to perform in, we can say, an adverse cultural situation is also a role of a leader, right? To motivate people, to get them to accommodate themselves, make them to work properly and comfortably, right? Beyond that, it is also understood that the leader's responsibility is to develop a system which can really drive the organization towards its goal. Right? We do talk of that. So how, like unit 11 deals with high performance work systems, what to do that. Beyond that, module 4 or block 4, it says unit 12 is international employee relationships, different sort of trains that we do see in international human resource management practices, and different sort of challenges, how to overcome that. What are the recent sort of changes that we witness in the present time, right, while dealing with the international organizations, right? So how to overcome that. So this is going to be our journey from unit 1 to unit 13 to having an understanding of the basic aspects of international human resource management practices, to dealing with various sort of challenges, right? Everything we are going to cover up under this particular course. So let us begin this course with an insight into this particular course. Right? Most of the time, when we do go for internationalization process or globalization process, people do have different sort of myths, misconceptions in their mind. Right? Let us understand the misconceptions that people do have, and let us have a clarity on that, so that throughout this journey we will look into the aspects in a different perspective altogether. Right? So myth number 1, most of the people say that global means international, global means multinational, global means transnational. No, there are differences. When I have to talk of being international or being multinational or being a global organization, I do not have similar sort of perceptions related to the organization in these issues. There are differences. These organizations having their international or multinational or transnational or global presence do exhibit different sort of characteristics. So they are not the same. That's what we need to understand. Most of the people do assume that this is what we have mentioned as myth 2. Globalization means doing similar things everywhere around the globe. This is the biggest mistake that most of the organizations will do if they do continue with this particular myth. Globalization is not to do the same thing everywhere, because the environmental factors, cultural factors, aesthetic practices of the people, and many such different issues like political, economical, technological environment of the countries do differ in a great way from one another. And if I'm not going to respect that, then whatever practices I do have, whatever strategies I'll build up, assuming that there will be similar sort of practices everywhere, so that is going to be a boomerang on me. I need to understand that. So global strategy doesn't mean doing same thing everywhere. It has to be customized according to the requirement of the international business practices. Myth number 3, people who say globalizing is being a stateless corporation, right? No national ties, no community ties. Stateless corporation means whatever I have all those policies, rules, regulations, practices, guidelines, whatever I do have for my organization, I'll continue with the same across the globe. No, I have to respect. Even if we do say that the liberalization policy of the organization, removes some of the hurdles, but that doesn't give a complete freedom to carry out the business everywhere. We have to abide by the rules and regulations of the particular country where we are going to have the business. So when I go beyond my domestic territory to have my operations at international level, at different countries, so there I need to understand that I have to respect the local rules and regulations. So I cannot impose my rules and regulations on that. As simple as that. Say, when we talk of equal employment opportunities, giving an example, we do have an act called EEO's Equal Employment Opportunity Act in USA. But when any such organization moves from USA to India, in India, we do not have an exact act, but we do have a replacement of that, affirmative action plans. So under these affirmative action plans, we do have various reservation categories for minority group and other groups, right? We do have Equal Remuneration Act, where it is said all those people who do have similar sort of work or assignments should be paid equally, eliminating all those diversity issues, right? All those discriminations. So what we need to understand is that when we move to a particular country, the relevant rules and regulations, relevant enactments of that particular country needed to be taken into consideration for the purpose. So we cannot have similar sort of thing everywhere. And most of the people do have this assumption that globalization means you need to abandon the country's image and values. Right? If people have this notion that be a Roman while in Rome, so perhaps this is one of the myths that people do live with. Yes, we need to pay respect to the local culture wherever we are having our operations. But that doesn't mean we will completely abandon our own values, our own ethical systems. So keeping a track of these ethical systems, we need to pay respect to the local culture wherever we do have our operations. That is what we need to understand. Right? So it's going international is not at the cost of sacrificing the local cultural values. We need to keep that local cultural values along with us, and then all of those things. Right? Myth number 5, what it says that globalization is tackling on acquisitions or alliances in other countries without much integration or change. No. You have to go for the different sort of strategic options when you are going for forming different sort of alliances. Nowadays we to talk of this mergers, acquisitions, buybacks, takeovers, all of these have become common phenomenon nowadays. Yeah. But all of these merger acquisition strategies will not be same everywhere. I have to customize that considering the requirement of that particular organization. I cannot merge two different companies to be one without any kind of change. Change is necessary. We have to think of that in that way, right? And people do say that the strategy must involve sales and operations in another country. So doesn't necessarily that is required. I can go beyond the international, beyond the domestic territory to any international market, right? By exporting the product. So I can have my own operations or manufacturing system in the domestic country, and I can export that. So the basic theme is that globalization is different approaches taken by the organization in different countries wherever they do have their operations. It's not doing the business in the same way. That is what. Right. So having clarity on this particular aspect of this globalization process, let us get acquainted with some of the terminologies that we are going to use it throughout this particular course. Right? One is home country or parent country. What it says, to understand one thing, that the place of origin of any such organization, right? The country of origin of any such organization is called as home country or the parent country, where the company or the organization originated from. That is what you need to understand, right? And whenever I do talk of the basic residents of that country where the organization originated, they are called as parent country nationals or home country nationals. Now, commonly called as parent country nationals, they are represented as PCNs, parent country nationals. Right. Beyond that, whenever I do go beyond the domestic level of territory to the international market, wherever beyond this domestic territory, in any country, in any place where I do start my business by establishing a subsidiary, a branch, that is called as the host country. Host country is the place or is a country which hosts my business in their country. So it's beyond the domestic level of domestic country or parent country itself. So wherever I do have my business, that is what we call it as host country. Okay? And when I refer to the citizens of the host country itself, they are called as host country nationals. Host country nationals, right? So host country nationals are referred as the citizens of the country where I do have established my subsidiary to carry out my business, right? So we do talk of the third country nationals. So in the process, whenever we do talk of this host country and the parent country. Now, if I to refer to any other country in relation to the host country and the parent country, they are called as the third country, right? So whenever I do refer to the people, right, of that particular country who perform their part of duties and responsibilities in my organization, they are called as third country nationals. Right? So if I do say country A is the origin, so that becomes the parent country. B is the place where the subsidiary is located, so that becomes the host country. Excluding this parent country and host country, if I do refer to any other country, or if I do refer to the people or the citizens of any other country, they are called as third country or third country nationals. Right? So beyond that, like whenever we do talk of this people beyond the host country and the parent country, they are third country. Well, let us have an insight into that in detail, right? So wherever we do talk of this term expatriate. Expatriate is a term which we use to understand that any such employee who lives in a foreign country, in a foreign location, temporarily for the purpose of carrying out certain assignment, they are called as expatriates. Right? So expatriates are the people who are deputed from the parent country to the host country, right? From the parent country to the host country, right? And temporarily work over there for a particular period of time, or maybe till the completion of the project, depends, right? So here in the diagram you can understand it. Like what it says, whenever we talk of this parent country, we say parent country or headquarter operations, right? This is the place of origin of that particular country. Now, let us say this dotted lines do create a segmentation in terms of country. Now, parent country organization has established a subsidiary in country A. Also, parent country has established another subsidiary in country B. So let us understand the relationships that these three such countries may have. So whenever these parent country people are deputed to work in country A, they are called as parent country nationals, right? So whenever I'm referring to this country A for my subsidiary 1, right? So this country A becomes the host country. And whenever I'm dealing with the people of this host country, they are called as host country nationals. So there may be the exchange of people from the parent country to host country A, parent country to host country B, like that. Similarly, it happens over here also. So parent country people are deputed to country B, which is the host country for my subsidiary B, right? So in that case, there will be frequent like interactions, exchange of resources from a subsidiary to the parent country, right? From the headquarter parent country office or the headquarter itself, right? But in relation to the parent country, whenever I do talk of this relationship between subsidiary A and subsidiary B, so they are called as the third countries for one another. So they don't have a direct relationship. So they are connected through the parent country operations, right? So they are the third country, and whenever we do talk of this, citizens of the third country people, we call it as third country nationals. I hope this has made us clear, because these are the terms that we are going to use frequently. We need to understand the home country, parent country, domestic country, the country of origin. People belonging to them, they are called as parent country nationals. Host country is a place where I am establishing my subsidiary. People belonging to the host country, they are called as host country nationals. Whenever I do talk of the relationships between this parent country and the host country itself, but I do refer a different category of people who neither belong to the parent country nor belong to the host country, they are called as third country nationals, right? So these are the terminologies that you need to understand. Then let us move to understand the basic types of organizations that I told you. Like I told you, no, globalization has got many myths, but all of those myths are related to the organizational practices only, right? So in terms of classifying the organizations, right? I do make a classification in terms of two dimensions. What is your global efficiency and what is your responsiveness to the local culture, local responsiveness. These are the two such dimensions on the basis of which these organizations are classified, right? What it says. Let us talk of these organizations. Here you can see in the diagram itself. So when I do have local responsiveness low as well as global efficiency is low, we call it as international organizations. So international organization actually is a type of organization, or it is the fast phase of an organization's journey to become global organization. That is right. So international organizations are the organizations who move for the first time from the domestic level of territory to the international borders, right? So they transfer their business from domestic to international borders itself. But they need to understand one thing here. All those organizations who move from domestic level of domestic territory to international borders, they do have an assumption that the factors, whatever has made the organization successful in the domestic territory, will be the same factors to consider for international presence. So that is why having this assumption, if the factors will lead to success in international level, at international organizations are the organizations who duplicate or who actually replicate their business of domestic territory to the international market. That means what? So in terms of the company's experiences, structures, policies, plans, rules, regulations, everything, right? They do believe it should be a replication of the same in international borders, right? So they're not giving enough space for the local responsiveness. Neither they give importance to global efficiency. This is just a replication of the business without much changes in the business practices. We call it as international organizations. Whenever we talk of this multinational organizations, here you can see multinational organizations are the organizations which do have presence in multiple countries. But one thing that we need to understand here is that they gather their resources, they allocate their resources from the coordination part is there from the domestic level itself. They gather each and every resource, right, from the regional area. Now, if you see over here, multinational organizations are the organizations which give high thrust on local responsiveness, low on global efficiency. So whenever I need to understand over here, whenever I do move from domestic level of territory to international borders, there I will come out with the different sort of rules, regulations, changes in the international organizations, right? So I cannot survive unless and until I pay respect to the local cultures, traditions, feeding habits, everything, local responsiveness. Right? So if the local aspects of the organization are being taken into consideration in the foreign subsidiaries, we call it as the multinational company itself. Right? But here you need to understand one thing, that your global efficiency is low. You don't have global presence, right? Multiple countries only, which may have similarities in terms of their cultures. Okay? And we do talk of third level of organizations here. You see it is called as transnational organizations. Transnational organizations are the organizations which do have high on local responsiveness, high on global efficiency. What it says? Now here the specialized facilities are being extended by the organization to ensure the local responsiveness, but at the same time here a very complex coordinated process has to be established, right, to have that global integration kind of thing, right? So that is what we need to understand. Transnational organizations are the organizations which give thrust on global efficiency as well as local responsiveness. That is what. Right? And finally, we were to talk of these global organizations. These are the organizations which do have presence around the globe, because the entire globe is nowadays treated as a single community, single marketplace, single country. Right? So global organizations are the organizations which pay lower attention to the differences of the host countries, local culture. That is what. Globalization is when we talk of with a uniform sort of approach being taken into consideration at the domestic or international level, right? Makes this global organizations unique. So whatever I do, I'll not make an exact replication of that. I need to customize that, but I need to have different sort of policies to deal with different countries. So whenever we're going to talk of these organizations at international level, so these organizations are international or multinational or transnational or global organizations. So all of these organizations do exhibit different sort of strategies. Not that all the organizations will have similar sort of strategies. No. Right? That is what that I need to understand. So it's not about doing the business at global level, having a set of rules and regulations which are applicable for all those organizations. No, but we need to customize that as per the phase of the organization, whether the organization is an international phase or multinational or transnational or global phase. That is what that will ensure us to have different sort of strategies. Right? So with this background, let us understand what this international human resource management practices are. Right? International, like let's make an analysis of some of the authors. What it says, Subaru says it can perform HRM and it is connected with connected activities and sort out of related and essential cultural and migrational facilities for future and current employees by the firm working in domestic and overseas countries. Right? So the definition says that HRM is a very complex and connected activity. So it's not about taking care of the people at the international level only, but how do we deal with them? That is what that connectivity has to be established. Okay? The basic problem that people do have is to get themselves acquainted in a different sort of structure, in different sort of culture altogether. Right? So there has to be proper training, maybe pre-departure, departure, ongoing different sort of training programs you can design. Right? And whenever people do move from one culture to the other culture, so they do come out with a basic issue of adaptability. And most of the failures in international assignment is because of the adaptability issues. That is right. And facilities for future and current employees, hard point as raised by Subaru. Definitely. So here, if I do talk of international human resource management practices, it's not confined to HR only. If I do talk of IHRM, it belongs to HR. Right? International management takes many such different aspects into account. Right? So taking care of the employees not only for the present time, but also that all those employees are valuable employees for me, and I need to keep on investing on those kind of employees so that I'll get a return in future. Right? So future and current employees' strengths can be there. Working in domestic and overseas countries, that will lead to different sort of issues. Whenever we are talking of this domestic and overseas countries, you come out with differences in terms of rules and regulations, laws, labor laws, right? We do have differences in terms of culture. We do have differences in terms of traditions. We do have different in terms of the all those fooding habits, clothing habits, dressing habits, etc., etc. Okay. The basic problem is that there is a huge diversity of the people. We may call it as cultural diversity, but right, there is a diversity, and as a HR manager, my basic role is to clear that grievances of the people or any such issue arising out of diversity that has to be dealt properly, right? So IHRM at one point of time is a connected kind of thing, networked kind of thing, where you're assigning people some international projects and you do take care of their cultural, migrational, all other aspects. Bokshal, another author, he defined that international human resource management is concerned with human resource problems of multinational firms in foreign subsidiaries with unfolding the HR issues associated with various stages of international. So one thing we need to understand that, like in the previous phase itself, as we discussed, that organizations do have this, international, multinational, transnational, and global. These are the four such different phases, right? And during these four phases, the requirement of the organization will be different. Okay? So all those issues, problems related to the operations of human resource management, right? That has to be dealt properly. We say that all those issues should come up first, okay? And then you can think of addressing all of those issues one by one. Okay? So in a simpler term, if I do see like this international human resource management practices, I can say that international HRM practices is basically a concern for establishing this, equity and harmony at the place of work, which will enable the workers to contribute further for the organizational growth and development, right? But a detailed model of international human resource management is represented by Morgan, J.P. Morgan, and it is commonly called as Morgan's model. Right? Here you can see, as we say, the three different places where we deal with the business: host country, home country, and other countries. Host country nationals are called as HCNs, parent country nationals are called as PCNs, third country nationals are TCNs, right? And the process is to procure, allocate, and utilize. This part is the common aspect of managing human resources in the organization. Okay? We say human resource management is the process of procuring, allocating, and utilizing the resources available in the organizations. That is right. So if we do understand this basic model, Morgan's model, we can define that international human resource management is a practice including procurement, utilization, and allocation. Procurement, allocation, and utilization of resources among the host country nationals, parent country nationals, and third country nationals, which continues their business and the relationship between the host country or the home country or the parent country are defined properly. Right? So that is how we do come out with the basic aspect of international human resource management practices. So procuring, allocating, effectively utilizing the human resources of the organization in a multinational corporation, right? But the point is, it says with proper integration and differentiation of HR activities in foreign locations, right? So what we need to do over here is to understand the differences between this domestic level of HR practices, right, and international level of HR practices. So going beyond the domestic level of territory, when I do find out similarities, right, in terms of HR practices, so that there I can apply the integration theory itself, right? So all those similar sort of practices can be grouped together, but there may be, differences. No? That is what you need to understand. So if there are differences, how do I manage those kind of differences? Okay. So it's a process of procuring, allocating, utilizing the human resources in multinational organizations. Right? Multinational means it is equally applicable for international, transnational, and global organizations, right? And multinational corporations, and creating that balance between this integration and the differentiation of HR activities. Right? So let us understand what are the basic differences that we do come out with when we deal with people at international level only. It says, in terms of administrative aspects, international HR activities are more complex because at domestic level you're dealing with this taxation. At domestic level, you're not dealing with cultural orientation, administrative services, right? But when we move for international level of practices, HR looks after all of those issues, starting from compensation management, which may have payment in terms of different sort of currency. So, HR people need to take care of all of those things. Okay. International human resource management actually deals with a variety of practices, or that maybe we can say that a broader perspective of dealing with the human resources are also required. Right? Broader perspective in a sense. You have to take the requirements of different stakeholders. Right? Like here, we need to understand that the requirements are different. Organizations are different. So that is why the coming out with a solution to each of those problems can be taken in a different way altogether. Okay? We will talk of involvement of employees' personal lives. Like whenever we do have any such employee who is an international assignee, right? So there, before departing for the international assignment, we need to think of the adjustments. Sometimes people used to carry their family with them, to carry their children with them, right? So everything. What about the engagement of the spouse in the overseas assignment? What about the education of the children in the place where this employee is assigned the task? Right? So looking after the day-to-day personal aspects of the organization is what that has been taken into consideration, right? We're talking of the basic challenges, because here we do have a workforce mix. So expatriates and host country nationals, they do have different expectations altogether because the cultural dimensions are different. Right? So that is what we need to understand. There is risk always for international assignments. So there may be a risk of a failure of international assignments. There may be risk of terrorism, and all those things, right? So there is a broader external continue करिए था कोड कंटिन्यू करिए
लाइन जो कटला पूरा कटि गेला
So, sorry for the inconvenience, but we'll come back to the session. We'll continue with the same place where we got this, we were discussing. So it's all about the kind of differences that we do bring into between this domestic level of practices to international level of practices. But broadly, we can classify all of those differences into 5 such broad heads. One is increased business activities, where we are talking of, as we discussed, there may be taxations, there may be international relocations. We are talking of expatriates. So the expatriate remuneration, the appraisals will have different sort of things. So cross-cultural training, cross-cultural issues, or the kind of accommodations that people do have, all of those issues are to be dealt, right? Not only that, we have to have a different sort of process for the repatriation, right? So dealing with repatriates are again a major issue. That is what we need to take into consideration, right? So these are things. Similarly, increased complexities that we need to take into consideration. Complexities in a sense that we are talking of, critical issues like currency fluctuations. We are talking of, different countries do have different sort of HR policies, HR practices, different sort of labor legislations, different sort of enactments. All of those things are to be taken into consideration. That makes the process more complex. When we cannot have a uniform policy for the entire organization around the globe. Okay. As we discussed, that increased involvement in the employee's life itself, personal life, like personal taxation, their voter registration, housing facility, children's education, health, recreational facility, spouse employment, all of these issues are to be taken into consideration. Right? We are dealing with the diversity, complex employee mix. Diversity, what it says, that cultural diversity, political diversity, religious practices, ethical practices, educational practices, legal backgrounds, all of those things are being taken into consideration, right? And then we are talking of the increased risk. Like always, people can be accommodated, but we can think of their health issues also. People may not be compatible with different sort of practices around the globe, right? So they need to accommodate with different environmental values itself, right? We need to think of that. Okay, so illnesses, different sort of personal security. Sometimes we do have, terrorism activities. People are being kidnapped. All of those kind of things are to be taken into consideration also. Right? However, whenever we are dealing with this organizational practices, right? So let us understand how these organizations actually lead to the different HR practices. So there are 4 such different sort of practices, as we have understood that there are 4 different ways of moving from domestic level of practices to global level of practices, being international, multinational, transnational, and global. Like that only, there are different approaches that we need to take into consideration. It is commonly called as EPRG model: ethnocentric, polycentric, regiocentric, and geocentric model itself, right? So ethnocentric model says you to have a replication of your domestic business in the foreign countries. So this ethnocentric approach is an approach where organizations for the first time expand from domestic level of practices to international level of practices. So that is the reason why they would like to replicate their domestic level of practice in the international organizations. So this may be a situation where our global efficiency is low and local responsiveness is low. So I am making an exact copy of my domestic practice in the international level. Right. So it has got certain advantages and disadvantages also. The basic thing is that the control mechanism can be done in a better way. The disadvantage is that I may have to depend on these expatriates completely to take care of everything, which may be a costliest matter for me. And accommodation to the local culture is also can be an issue. We do talk of polycentric approach. In this polycentric approach, it is just the opposite of ethnocentric approach, you can say. So here, the organizations do rely on the host country nationals, completely host country nationals. So they do take these organizations as the subsidiaries as a different unit altogether. So these subsidiaries are taken as a complete separate unit taking care of everything. So it is completely controlled by the host country nationals. Advantages of this ethnocentric approach becomes the disadvantage of polycentric approach, right? Like that it becomes. So quickly just going through that. Regiocentric approaches, I'm taking care of everything in a regional location. So we say economic regions are the things that we need to take into consideration. Right? And it has got its advantages, disadvantages also. But our ultimate objective is to become a global organization. So geocentric approach is the approach what we need to take into consideration. So here I'm not confining myself to any host country or any parent country. The entire globe is treated as a single country. So I can have people from any other place around the globe, right? So these are the four approaches. However, this EPRG model is what that we are going to discuss in our forthcoming classes. Like wherever we do talk of the staffing requirement, we do talk of EPRG model, we do talk of cultures, we do talk of EPRG model like that. So we'll have the basic, right? So let us end up this session over here with some of the challenges like high failure rates, deployment, barrier to women, international ethics, language, law, labor laws, political climate, all of these things that becomes a challenge or gradually we are going to explore and we'll try to find out a solution for that, right? So I hope with this we must have got an insight into the course and let us explore more aspects of this particular course in future days, right? So thank you very much and have a good day. Thank you.